Welcome back to our channel, where we explore the depths of biblical teachings and their relevance to our lives today. In today's video, we're going to talk about a serious and often misunderstood topic: the 3 most terrible sexual sins in the Bible. Stay tuned to learn more about these sins and their implications. While all sins are serious, the Bible highlights certain sexual sins as particularly grievous. Let's explore 3 of these sins and understand why they are considered so severe. First, let's talk about adultery. Adultery is defined as a married person engaging in sexual relations with someone other than their spouse. The Bible explicitly condemns adultery in the 10 Commandments. You shall not commit adultery, Exodus 20:14. But why is this sin so grievous? This commandment underscores the sanctity of marriage, which is viewed as a covenantal relationship ordained by God. Adultery is seen as a severe breach of this covenant, not just between the individuals involved, but also in their relationship with God. Adultery is seen as a betrayal of trust and a violation of the sacred covenant of marriage. It not only harms the individuals involved but also has a ripple effect on families and communities. Proverbs 6:32 says, "But a man who commits adultery has no sense. Whoever does so destroys himself." This verse highlights the self-destructive nature of adultery, emphasizing the emotional and spiritual damage it causes. Adultery undermines trust and fidelity, leading to broken families and communities. It's a sin that affects not just the individuals involved but also their loved ones. The second sin is fornication, which refers to sexual relations outside of marriage. In 1 Corinthians 6:18, Paul urges believers to flee from sexual immorality. Fornication is seen as a sin against one's own body, which is considered a temple of the Holy Spirit. Engaging in sexual activity outside the covenant of marriage goes against God's design for intimacy and purity. Fornication is considered grievous because it undermines the sanctity of marriage and the purpose of sexual relations as designed by God. It can lead to emotional and physical consequences, such as broken relationships and unplanned pregnancies. Moreover, it can distance individuals from their spiritual path and relationship with God. Fornication, defined as sexual intercourse between people who are not married to each other, is condemned in the Bible for several reasons. While it might seem like a personal, the Bible presents a clear framework for sexual relations, intended to occur within the bounds of marriage between a man and a woman. This design is rooted in the creation narrative, where God creates Eve as a companion for Adam, establishing the first marital relationship, Genesis 2:24. Fornication deviates from this divine plan, undermining the sanctity and purpose of sexual relations as intended by God. It is seen as a sin against one's own body, which is considered a temple of the Holy Spirit. In 1 Corinthians 6:18-20, Paul writes, "Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually, sins against their own body. Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own, you were bought at a price. Therefore honor God with your bodies." This passage highlights the spiritual significance of maintaining sexual purity, as our bodies are meant to honor God. Choice involving one's own body, the biblical perspective emphasizes broader spiritual, relational, and communal implications. Like, share and subscribe for more videos like this. Fornication can lead to emotional and relational harm. Sexual relations outside of marriage can result in broken relationships, emotional pain, and a lack of commitment and trust. The Bible emphasizes the importance of love, fidelity, and mutual respect within marriage, which fornication undermines. Hebrews 13:4 states, "Marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and all the sexually immoral." This underscores the importance of maintaining purity within the marital relationship. Fornication can have broader social and communal implications. It can lead to issues such as unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted infections, and the breakdown of family structures. These consequences affect not only the individuals involved but also their families and communities. The Bible's teachings on sexual morality aim to promote healthy, stable, and loving relationships that contribute to the well-being of society as a whole. In the Bible, sexual immorality, including fornication, is often used symbolically to represent unfaithfulness to God. For example, in the Old Testament, Israel's idolatry is frequently likened to adultery and fornication, symbolizing spiritual unfaithfulness, Jeremiah 3:6-9. This metaphor highlights the seriousness of sexual sin, as it reflects a deeper spiritual betrayal. The Bible calls believers to live lives of holiness and purity. 1 Thessalonians 4:3-5 states, "It is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality, that each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the pagans, who do not know God." This passage emphasizes the importance of self-control and living in a way that honors God, contrasting the behavior of believers with that of those who do not follow God's ways. While fornication might seem like a personal choice involving one's own body, the Bible presents it as a sin with significant spiritual, relational, and communal consequences. It violates God's design for sexuality, harms relationships, and undermines the sanctity of marriage. By adhering to biblical teachings on sexual morality, believers are called to honor God with their bodies, maintain purity, and contribute to the well-being of their communities. Lastly, let's explore the sin of homosexuality. This is a sensitive and often controversial topic, but it's important to understand the biblical perspective. Leviticus 18:22 states, "Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, that is detestable." Similarly, Romans 1:26-27 discusses how same-sex relations are contrary to God's design. Not married to each other. The Bible addresses this in 1 Corinthians 6:18, "Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually, sins against their own body." The Bible's stance on homosexuality is rooted in the belief that sexual relations are intended to be between a man and a woman within the bounds of marriage. This view is based on the creation narrative in Genesis, where God creates Eve as a companion for Adam. The purpose of this union is not only companionship but also procreation and the continuation of humanity. It's important to approach these topics with compassion and understanding. While the Bible provides clear guidance on sexual morality, it also emphasizes love, forgiveness, and redemption. Jesus' message in the New Testament is one of grace and reconciliation. John 8:11 recounts Jesus' words to the woman caught in adultery, "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." Leviticus 18:22 verse is part of a broader set of laws given to the Israelites, aimed at maintaining holiness and distinguishing them from surrounding nations. The term detestable indicates a strong disapproval, reflecting the belief that such acts are contrary to God's design for human sexuality. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul addresses homosexuality in Romans 1:26-27. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men, and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. Paul describes homosexual acts as contrary to the natural order established by God, emphasizing that these behaviors result from turning away from God. Both Leviticus and Romans highlight that homosexual acts are seen as violations of the natural order. The biblical narrative presents heterosexual relationships within marriage as the intended context for sexual relations. This design is rooted in the creation story, where God creates Eve as a companion for Adam, establishing the first marital relationship, Genesis 2:24. The laws in Leviticus, including the prohibition against homosexual acts, are part of a broader call to holiness. The Israelites were instructed to live in a way that set them apart from other nations, reflecting God's holiness. Sexual purity was a significant aspect of this call to holiness. In Romans, Paul links homosexual acts to a broader rejection of God. He describes these behaviors as resulting from idolatry and turning away from God's truth. This connection underscores the spiritual implications of such acts, portraying them as symptoms of a deeper spiritual issue. While the Bible clearly condemns homosexual acts, it is crucial to approach this topic with sensitivity and compassion. Here are some key points to consider. Every individual is created in the image of God and possesses inherent dignity and worth. This belief calls for treating all people with respect and love, regardless of their sexual orientation. Jesus' ministry emphasized love, grace, and forgiveness. In John 8:1-11, Jesus encounters a woman caught in adultery and responds with compassion, saying, "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." This story highlights the importance of offering grace and the possibility of redemption for all sinners. Upholding biblical teachings on sexuality does not mean condemning or ostracizing individuals. Instead, it involves speaking the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15, and offering support and guidance to those seeking to align their lives with biblical principles.